Welcome to Skytech-Lens. Picture this. A student arrives at a foreign university only to be denied entry. A business deal collapses because executives can't get visas in time. The once mighty blue US passport is losing its golden ticket status, as global travel rules are rewritten in 2025. Visa-free access is shrinking, costs are rising, and bureaucratic delays are stranding thousands. This is a worldwide trend, driven by politics, economics, and security concerns. Today, we'll reveal the 10 destinations where Americans now face the toughest entry restrictions, and why the world map is being redrawn for US travelers. Turkey still allows Americans to visit visa-free for up to 90 days, but that access is anything but guaranteed. Turkish visa policy shifts with political winds. Sudden suspensions have caught travelers and businesses off guard. The principle of reciprocity drives this volatility. Any US restrictions on Turkish citizens are often matched in kind. For Americans, this means travel plans can change overnight, and monitoring official advisories is essential. Tourism operators and businesses in Turkey have learned to brace for sudden downturns when politics flare. The bottom line, Turkey's door is open, but every trip is a reminder that global politics can change the rules in an instant. North Korea is almost entirely off-limits to Americans. US law bans travel there for tourism. Only rare exceptions are made for journalists or humanitarian missions, and even then, visitors face constant surveillance. Americans are watched more closely than other Westerners, reflecting deep suspicion from the regime. Every move is monitored and the risk of detention is real. Several Americans have been held for years over minor infractions. In North Korea, an American isn't just a visitor, they're a potential political pawn. The consequences of misstepping can be devastating. Russia has become one of the most difficult and risky destinations for Americans. The US State Department's Do Not Travel advisory warns of harassment, wrongful detention, and arbitrary law enforcement. The visa process is now even more complex, requiring extensive documentation and official invitations. As US-Russia relations have soured, both sides have made travel harder for each other. Americans in Russia face heightened risks, and the US Embassy's ability to help is severely limited. For now, Russia is effectively off-limits for all but the most determined and risk-tolerant travelers. China remains open to Americans, but getting a visa is now a bureaucratic maze. Applicants must submit detailed itineraries and personal histories, often spending money up front with no guarantee of approval. Political tensions have led to stricter scrutiny and shorter, single-entry visas. The US and China are locked in a cycle of reciprocal restrictions, making business and academic exchanges harder. Even after entry, Americans risk arbitrary legal action and exit bans with limited consular protection. The era of easy travel to China is over, replaced by a wall of paperwork and suspicion. For many, the barrier is now too high to cross. Brazil's brief visa-free period for Americans ended in 2025, as the country reinstated visa requirements based on reciprocity. Now, Americans must apply for an e-visa, adding cost and uncertainty to travel plans. The change is a response to US visa rules for Brazilians, and signals a return to diplomatic tit-for-tat. The tourism industry feels the impact, with fewer spontaneous trips and more bureaucracy. Brazil's message goodwill must be mutual, and visa-free access is a privilege, not a right. For Americans, it's a reminder that travel freedoms can vanish overnight. Venezuela is one of the world's most dangerous and inaccessible countries for Americans. The US has no embassy there, and direct flights are non-existent. Political hostility, rampant crime, and a collapsed infrastructure make travel nearly impossible. Americans risk arbitrary detention, violent crime, and have no consular support if things go wrong. The humanitarian crisis means even basic needs like food and medicine are scarce. For US citizens, travel to Venezuela is not just risky, it's life-threatening. The country is a definitive no-go zone. US-Iran relations remain deeply hostile, making travel for Americans exceptionally risky. Americans must join government-approved tours with guides at all times. Independent travel is forbidden. The visa process is slow, opaque, and often ends in denial. Detentions of Americans on espionage charges are common, with no US embassy to help, only limited Swiss assistance. Dual nationals are treated solely as Iranians, losing US protection. Iran's rich culture is overshadowed by the real danger of arbitrary detention. For Americans, visiting Iran is a high-stakes gamble. Syria is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, devastated by war and terrorism. The US has no embassy there, and the State Department's do not travel warning is absolute. Borders are controlled by warring factions, and Westerners are prime targets for kidnapping or worse. Even regime-controlled areas are perilous with the risk of arbitrary arrest and torture. The ancient wonders of Syria are now inaccessible, scarred by violence. For Americans, Syria is completely off-limits, the risks are total and the consequences can be tragic. Yemen's civil war has created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with the country split between warring factions. The U.S. Embassy is closed, and there's no government support for Americans. Terrorist groups, kidnappings, and active combat make travel nearly impossible. Infrastructure is destroyed, and basic necessities are scarce. Obtaining a visa or safe passage is virtually impossible, with airports and borders often closed or controlled by armed groups. Yemen's history and architecture are overshadowed by tragedy and danger. For Americans, travel to Yemen is unthinkable. Libya remains in chaos, with rival governments and militias battling for control. The U.S. Embassy is closed, and Americans have no consular support. Crime, terrorism, and kidnappings are rampant, with foreigners especially at risk. Travel within Libya is hazardous, with unpredictable checkpoints and shifting allegiances. Obtaining a visa is unreliable, and the country's ancient sites are tragically out of reach. The U.S. government's advice is clear: do not travel to Libya. The risks of violence or detention are simply too great. The U.S. passport is no longer a universal key. Travel freedom now depends on shifting geopolitics and reciprocity. Americans must be vigilant, informed, and ready for sudden changes in entry rules. For students, businesses, and families, travel now requires careful planning and risk assessment. The desire to explore remains strong, but the path is more complex than ever. Being a global citizen in 2025 means understanding that travel is a privilege, not a guarantee. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more insights on our changing world. Thanks.